Thank you so much for coming to this very special presentation featuring artist Emily Kelting on the photography of Myanmar. I'm Julia Ray Hoddenfield. I'm the manager of adult programs here, and I'm very pleased to partner with the Carriage Barn Arts Center, who here has been to the lovely Carriage Barn in New Canaan. Of course you have. We love them. And this is installment 2 in our Women in Art series. We have our third segment on February 13th on women artists who are also surrealists with Paige Knox. That will be fantastic. So make sure you register that. Tonight, you're in for a super treat. Emily Kelting presents an intimate view of the most photogenic country in the world, with photographs of the beautiful landscape and humanity can be missed by tourists. And through the lens of her camera, Emily Kelting takes us through her travels to Myanmar in January 2020. We will trace the heartbreaking military coup that occurred in February 2021, and we'll learn about the joy of relationships she forged during her visit. And Emily Kelting is an artist, landscape designer, writer, and avid ice skater who has presented her many talents in venues around Connecticut. Proud exhibiting member of the Rowayton Art Center, Carriage Barn Arts Center, and owner of her own landscape company, Greatscapes, and founder of Ice Skating for Everyone. A very talented and busy lady for sure. We're lucky to have her. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Emily Kelting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julia Ray, for that wonderful introduction. It was in a kind of odd way. I had been a child figure skater, and my first career after college was as a professional skater for the International Holiday on Ice, touring Europe and South America in a carrot costume in a Bugs Bunny number, doing the cha-cha on my toe picks. So I wrote about my experiences in Holiday on Ice, first for the Vassar Alumni Magazine, and then my dad said, "Oh, this is really good, you should." And miraculously, it was picked off the slush pile at 17 magazine. So my writing career began in New York in the 70s, and I was lucky enough to be on staff at New York Magazine and Self Magazine, and I wrote a lot of articles for many magazines and newspapers on all sorts of subjects. I got a plum assignment because of being a former skater, and I still had a lot more to say about children in sports. I got this assignment. I had written for the New York Times Magazine, and I got an assignment to write about child athletes. And out of the blue, I got a call from Jill Kremens, who is a photographer who this series called A Very Young This or A Very Young That, and we happen to have in our audience tonight Torrance York, profiled as the very young gymnast. And it a really wonderful coincidence that both Torrance and I turned out to be photographers living in New Canaan and devotees of Jill Kremens. She'll be having her semaphore show. So anyway, so Jill and I became, Jill said, she called and she said, "I have sources for you. I can use my photographs for your article for the Times Magazine." And yes, and they appeared in my very long article in the Times Magazine, and then I still had more to say, so I turned it into so in the process, Jill and I became friends. Taught me about photography. She steered me to my first camera, which was a Rolly 35 point and shoot, and and she told me, always have it with you. Be sure you have a stop whenever you see something that interests you. And so I did. And because she was married to Kurt Vonnegut, she had an entree, of course, into the literary and social worlds in New York City. And I kind of came along sometimes, and I watched how she worked. She didn't have a fancy Hasselblad. She had no lights, strobes or flash. But she had a great way of putting her subjects at ease. And then just in a nanosecond, she'd take a picture. Kind of got hooked, and I signed up for a class at the International Center of Photography in New York and roamed the streets looking for that, as Cartier-Bresson said, the decisive moment, funny or sad or poignant or just. And then I moved to Connecticut with my family in 1992 and signed up for courses at Silvermine. And so at this point now, 20 years after graduating from college, I've had 10 careers, but photography is the one that I love most. It's for me, it's starting with composing an image, hopefully like Jill was able to do, capture the spirit of the place or the person, then editing each photo in Lightroom or convey my vision as powerfully as possible. I love exhibiting and selling my work, even sometimes, in juried shows and schmoozing with my fellow artists at the opening receptions. Love doing slideshow, and I am speakers list of the Garden Club of America, so I do garden clubs and talk about all usually related to horticulture or my landscape design. I love teaching. For the past 10 years, I've been teaching iPhone photography, and I love seeing my students get excited when they discover what their cameras can do, and it's taking their photos from a mere snapshot art that they enjoy sharing with their friends and families. So, and I have some iPhone classes coming up. If anybody's interested, there's a sign. How did I get to Myanmar? In January of 2019, I took my first international photo tour to India. On this tour, my eyes were open to the incredible culture, history, religion, culture, most of all the colors of India. And that photography tour, which was run by an outfit called Luminous Journeys, all the other photographers said, India is so exotic, but yet Myanmar is the most beautiful country in the world. And so I signed up for the tour of Myanmar for January 2020. As an official senior citizen collecting Medicare, I knew that I might not have it so easy on a 30 hours of travel halfway around the world on 2 flights sardined into a small seat. Crossing so many time zones, I'd have to deal with jet lag. So I told the tour company I wanted to arrive early in order to recover from all this. But when I finally arrived in Yangon on January 3rd, I looked at the airport. I got there at 12:30 a.m. and after, like I said, 30 hours of travel. And I looked for the sign with my name on it, and it was not there. So I stayed with a lot of Burmese cabbies who want to take me, for a ride. I finally, there was one nice one who had been there from the beginning, and so he drove me to the hotel, and it took like an hour, and so at like 2 or 3, there's this dim light in the mist, and it's the reservation. So I sort of collapse under the counter, and then I get to my room, write an email to the tour director, and I heard that the next morning, but that was how I got to meet Soso, who's Soso owned and managed the tour company for Myanmar. The next morning at 10 o'clock, she was in the lobby, and I met her, and she said, "Let's go to high tea." So we took my arm, and then we went, and having, pastries and cucumber and salmon sandwiches. Prospect is looking a whole lot better, and there's light out there on the lake, and she gets me the best room in the Wyndham Grand. This was my first, which is of this Golden Dragon boat with this lake, and there's this beautiful park. Democracy was in full swing. There was a mall and the kids in bumper cars next to the which was actually attached to the hotel, and in the park there were kids playing. There were women shopping here in the mall. The next 2 days, I walked around and I saw Yangon, and then our tour started with, this was our tour guide. He was an amazing guy and a wonderful photographer, and just a really great person who laughter sort of bubbled up within him. And he just in a rural area of Myanmar, on this little plot of land. They didn't have any money. Somehow he was given, when he was 9, a camera from China, a really bad, like brownie-like type camera. But he didn't have money to. He took the roll of film, but didn't have any way to develop it. And his mother went into her rainy day up the Irrawaddy Irrawaddy River, 27 miles to the only place where his film could get developed. It was so good that he then, right, the old Rangoon in the British days, and an incredible photographer and person. KK was just an amazing guy who, and it was so lucky because he was innately so generous. He knew all the people especially in the remote states where we went, laughing, and then we were laughing, and then we were kind of talking to them. So it was really a beautiful thing, and a beautiful man. And now he's a UN. Blue arrow points to the Irrawaddy River, which runs down we started in Yangon and then up in Bagan. 2,500 Buddhist temples were built over 1,000 years ago on this plain that borders the Irrawaddy River. And all boys and men in Myanmar have to serve some time, have to go to a monastery for some time. There are 500,000 monks in Myanmar. We were allowed entrance for us to go into this monastery, and I knew it's nice to kind of go into a situation knowing photographically, and I wanted to shoot this novice monk on the left with in what's called chiaroscuro light inside of the face shaded, and it creates mystery and depth. We had time to set up and take a lot of pictures in that monastery, and sometimes that was the case. But other times, like when we were on the street, this was on the picture on the right, in the marketplace, she was collecting alms. And then here are two more photos in Bagan. I wanted to catch on the one on the left, I wanted to catch the light coming through that windows, being there praying, and then on the right is another one outside that same temple. And for that one, for the one on the right, it would have been completely a blackened silhouette, because it's a backlit photo with the sun coming from behind. So the umbrella. So at home here, it mentioned I'm pretty busy. I have 4 businesses that I run, and I found that great thing about being on this photo tour was that I could be completely in the photographic moment under the watchful eye of Buddha. And this Buddha is like stretched on for 2 buildings. Its feet were in like another building. And I myself getting into that meditative mood and peaceful place. So that was a wonderful thing. And then here were 2 monks' road. This was the road that goes up to, as I said, there were temples on the plain, and there's everybody goes at sunset so they can get the picture of the sun setting over all the temples. This was that road. It was a dusty road, and there were a lot of trucks and cars and motorbikes going by, kicking up the dust and the dirt. It turned out to actually be a good thing, an atmospheric thing for this photo, which I called sun showers. I had to wait patiently for a long time for the road to clear, but then was happy with this shot. And I also fulfilled one of my life's bucket list adventures of taking my first hot air balloon ride over. It was at dawn, and there I am, in the bucket there. And it was so cool to see all the temples from above, and in the bottom shot to see there were all the temples, and then there's the Irrawaddy River snaking around, and the mountains in the background. It was very special, because it's always good in photography to get different perspectives. Sometimes you shoot from on high, sometimes you shoot from down below. So here I was, you can hardly see it, I think, but there's a man meditating down there on the bottom right, and then the hot air balloons going over. So from Bagan, we traveled all day, and we went up to a place called the Chin State. It was 6,000 feet up the mountains there, and it was pretty much life as it has been unchanged for centuries, like 1,000 years. This is a woman who has obviously tattooed face, and she's smoking a pipe. It's not your average New Canaanite. And the legend is, 1,000 years ago, there was a Burmese king, went up to this very remote area, found a woman that the young women in Myanmar, or Burma then, are really beautiful, and he brought her back to Rangoon to be his palace, to be one of his many wives. And she was miserable, and so somehow escaped and made it all the way back to her home, and then fearing that he was going to come get her, tattoo her face so she would go, from beautiful to ugly. And then all the other women did it too, because so that she wouldn't stand out as the lone tattooed woman. So this became a tradition, and we took a 6-mile hike or 7-mile hike. It was called the Tiger Hunter Villages. There were actually tiger hunters here. Pretty amazing, a way of life in these villages that we went to. Some sisters sitting outside there. These are one room that everything happens. These are sisters and mothers, and they were so sweet. And because KK could talk to them, they knew him. It was just a beautiful moment, because we got to talk to them too, and see their kids. They have nothing, but they're happy. There's a sort of a joy that it was just lovely to see them and talk to them. Some people there I'm photographing on the right. This woman, this was the oldest woman with a tattooed face. She was 100-something. And she had a flute that she played with her nose through her nostril. She was pretty good. I'm sorry I didn't get a video of it. And coming down from the mountains, we saw, agriculture is the biggest, is the mainstay of the economy we saw women doing everything. Like in this case, we were driving along the highway, and the women, they were doing road construction, and the women were bringing the gravel on their heads, usually having a kid holding on to them or in their arms, and the men were way back where the gravel pit was. They're laying down the gravel, and here we all are. I'm in the middle with them, and just they were great. Our next stop was Mandalay in Rudyard Kipling's The Road to Mandalay. The road to Mandalay actually isn't a road at all, but is the Irrawaddy River. And so when taking photographs, I like to take usually. Well, I take a lot of each kind, but an establishing shot, more wide angle, and you see the whole thing. There was the Ubain Bridge at dawn. Goes on for over a mile, that bridge. And then this is a mid shot taken from the bridge of the fishermen casting their net, and then close-ups of people enjoying the bridge. It's the main activity at sunset especially. There are monks on the right, and Emily is waving on the left, and it was really... And in Mandalay, too, we saw this market, which was the weirdest thing. There were these women. We arrived before dawn, and the women have set out on the upper right, on the upper left. They've set out all their, and then an hour later, they're madly clearing it all off, because each hour the train comes through, and here's the train on the lower left coming through, and then on the right. Mandalay, we went up the Irrawaddy to another place called Mingun, which incredible temple. Most of the temples in Myanmar are red brick, but this one was huge and white and took up a whole city block. And I photographed the monks these boy monks who were kind of riding the waves of the ridges. Last stop we went to was Inle Lake. Fulfilled another bucket list thing by actually staying at one of the bungalows on stilts. Next day we woke up at 4, and KK said, make sure you have a lot of space on your memory cards. You're going to take so we started with going to a viewing platform in the middle of the lake and seeing these, they're called Inti fishermen. They were amazing. They paddled, they had an oar wrapped around one of their legs, and then they balanced on the back of this little narrow platform with the other, and that's how they kind of got places by rowing this way. And then here it was really cold, but it was really special. The mist was coming over the lake. The fishermen were making tea in the boats and drinking tea before they would actually start fishing. And then the sun was coming up and the birds were flying. So fishermen in Mandalay, which was the river, these lake fishermen, they had these conical nets that they would, and I'm very interested in horticulture and gardens and stuff. So I was really fascinated with what they were doing on this lake. For removing this, it's called water hyacinth, and it's a highly invasive plant, so they were removing it. Then they were bringing in big, equipment to build berms. And where's the third one? Oh yeah, and there's and then they're planting So later in the day, we went into one of the floating villages to see, these are called Padang, women. I had been in Thailand in Chiang Mai and in these remote areas. In Thailand too, they had women with these, brass rings around their necks. 24 of them on the women on the right, and they don't know exactly why they're wearing these rings. That one tradition has it that didn't want children to be attacked by who would go for their necks, and so that's why they, others say it's a beauty thing. And the rings on her, on the side of her face, that's called Tanaka, and it's also it's to prevent sunburn, and it's also moisten and moisturize the skin. They did have incredibly beautiful skin. In another part of Inle Lake, we saw like women coming out of the woods, selling with all their wares, with all their textiles. They had babies, on them. And then I saw this, old woman coming out of the woods too, who had baskets of kindling on her back and on her head. And here, this was actually in Bagan, but I was noticing a pattern here that the women were doing amazing physical labors. And here, this woman, firewood, which is of course really important for their livelihood, to live and to cook. And then her son in a basket. And in the temples too, is the women sweeping all the time. So then our tour was over. We went back to Yangon. We got to see the last night, last 2 nights, these golden temples glowing, and it was just so beautiful. That's Suli Pagoda with the cars zipping around. And then there was this great elephant fountain in a park, the most sacred temple in Myanmar called Shwedagon, I think it's called. And it's covered with gold and rubies, and it was kind of ironic. It was nice. My tour started with the gold of the dragon boat from my hotel room and was ending. The tour wasn't quite over. I mean, the tour was over, but my involvement with Myanmar was not. A week or 2 after I left, COVID hit Myanmar, and the country closed down. A year after that, February 21, there was a military coup. It had been like I said, democracy was thriving. There had been a democratic government, and military has always coexisted, has always had a part in the government, even when it was democratic. Here it shows there are a lot of ethnic groups, and purple on the left, the Rohingya, that's the Rakhine state. With the Rohingya, there has been war on them and throwing them into camps in Bangladesh, and we didn't go. We went to the Chin state, which is right above it, as you can see, but we didn't go. And so after the coup, everybody, that's actually the Sule Pagoda on the right, and all the protesters. And so I asked Ben, the Luminous Journeys, how is KK, how is Soso, how are they doing with this? He said, well, KK lives outside and is fine. Soso, however, and her daughters are protesting in the streets, and the police are coming to their apartment and arresting people. And it was a very scary time. And of course, she lost her job, tourism. Thanks to a lot of you who contributed, I raised money for to help her, which she then also fed to a lot of her neighbors. Right as the coup was happening, I helped so I organized a Zoom call there were 60 8th graders at New Canaan Country School who were studying the family in Myanmar. Soso and her 2 daughters were on the other end of the call, and Congressman Jim Himes came on the call. Really was an amazing thing, especially for to hear from other teenagers, 2 girls, about how their lives had changed overnight during this. The older daughter, whose nickname was Poo Poo, but we changed to her real name, one of her real names, because they have about 3 to 5 names. A student visa. She had been in college. She had started college at 16, but then, there was no school for 2 years. So she got her a scholarship to come. The hardest part was actually getting her out of the country. There was a lot of violence happening around the U.S. Embassy in Yangon. But she had never been on an airplane before, and she had never been away from home. And she flew. There weren't very many flights going out, and she flew for 36 hours ours came here. That's a scarf that Anka, Kathy Pike over there, she had provided winter clothes for her because she was headed to Southern New Hampshire University on a scholarship, and where she studied for a year, and now she's back. Southern New Hampshire has always been a online university before COVID and anything. She's now back in Myanmar with her family studying. And she'll come back in 2 years when she graduates. Wants to go to Disney World. Maybe we'll get to. But she would choose joy. In the 10 days before we went up to Southern New Hampshire, went back to country school, talked to the then 9th graders, talked to them about the situation in Myanmar and how everything was. She missed her family a whole lot. Never having been away, and now she's now 21. She was celebrated her birthday, and on the left there in the orange, and her mom So, and her younger sister Tai, who really wants to come very badly, but we'll see. And then me I was fortunate to be named one of the masters in the Rowayton Arts Center. It was the first time I have exhibited and a lot of my Myanmar pictures separately, but this was the first time that they were all together, and a lot of you came, and thank you. And
well, I think I can speak for all of us when I say that I hope that you do continue taking photographs, and I hope that you will come back again and share your future travels with us. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming to tonight's program. Hope to see you again soon.